Welcome. Tonight, we invite you into a peaceful corner of the universe. Odin, the All-Father, ruler of Asgard and protector of the Nine Realms, stood at the edge of the Bifrost, gazing out into the void of the cosmos. His once mighty figure, broad and imposing, now seemed worn, burdened by the countless ages of battles fought, realms protected, and the weight of leadership. In his remaining eye, the wisdom of millennia gleamed, but behind that, a shadow lingered, an awareness that his time was nearing its end. For centuries, Odin had ruled with an iron fist and a compassionate heart, balancing the needs of the realms while maintaining Asgard's dominance. He had seen gods rise and fall, empires crumble and rebuild. But even gods must face their mortality. Odin had long sensed the approach of Ragnarok, the prophesied end of all things, and with it, his own demise. Yet, the nature of a god such as Odin was not to shrink from destiny but to meet it head-on. As the stars twinkled above him, a deep rumbling echoed through the fabric of reality. From the farthest reaches of the cosmos came the enemy, Surtur, the fire demon of Muspelheim, the one foretold to end Asgard's reign. Surtur had long been Odin's rival, their battles spanning the annals of history, but this time, the fire giant sought finality. Wielding the Twilight Sword, a blade capable of cleaving through dimensions and fates, Surtur tore through the Nine Realms, intent on bringing destruction and chaos in his wake. Odin knew he could not let Surtur reach Asgard. Summoning the last vestiges of his strength, the All-Father donned his battle armor for what he knew would be his final confrontation. As the skies above Asgard darkened, thunder roared across the heavens, and a great tempest brewed. The gods of Asgard gathered, watching their king stride toward battle one last time. Thor, Odin's son and the mightiest of Asgard's warriors, stood by his father's side, ready to fight alongside him. But Odin halted him with a single glance. "There are battles a son cannot fight for his father," Odin said, his voice filled with authority and tenderness. "This one belongs to me." Thor's heart was heavy, but he obeyed. He knew that Odin was not just defending Asgard. He was protecting the cosmos, holding the line between order and chaos. As much as he wanted to aid his father, this was Odin's final burden to bear alone. The clash between Odin and Surtur shook the very foundations of Yggdrasil, the world tree that connects all realms. Their battle raged across dimensions, spilling into distant galaxies, with the fiery heat of Muspelheim colliding against the cold, ancient power of Odin's might. Odin's spear, Gungnir, lashed out, striking with precision and fury. Every blow was a testament to his mastery of combat and his command over the arcane forces of the universe. But Surtur was relentless. Fueled by the fires of eternal destruction, the fire demon's might grew with each strike, the Twilight Sword burning brighter with each passing moment. As the battle dragged on, Odin's strength waned. His once immortal body, now bearing the scars of countless wars, began to falter. With a final swing of his sword, Surtur struck a blow that sent Odin crashing to the ground. For the first time in millennia, the All-Father was brought to his knees. His breath came in ragged gasps, his power diminished, but his spirit remained unbroken. As Surtur approached, towering over him, the fire giant raised the Twilight Sword for the killing blow. Odin did not flinch. Instead, he summoned the last remnants of his divine power, and with a blinding flash of energy, he unleashed one final, devastating strike. Gungnir flew from his hand, embedding itself in Surtur's chest. The fire demon roared in pain, but it was not enough to destroy him. With one final, thunderous swing, Surtur brought down the Twilight Sword, cleaving Odin's chest with a fatal blow. The skies of Asgard darkened as Odin fell, The gods watching from the city's great halls felt the shift, the moment when the greatest among them had been slain. Thunder rumbled across the heavens, and the winds howled in mourning. As Odin's life force ebbed, Thor arrived at his side. Kneeling before his father, he cradled Odin's head in his arms, his heart breaking. The All-Father's breathing was labored, but he opened his eye, gazing upon his son one last time. "My son," Odin rasped, his voice barely a whisper. "The throne, the realms, they are yours now. Protect them. Lead them." Thor's grip tightened, his face etched with sorrow. "Father, please." But Odin shook his head, the last vestiges of his strength fading. "No tears, my son. This is the way of things. Every king must one day fall, so another may rise." With that, the light in Odin's eye dimmed, and the All-Father, ruler of Asgard for millennia, drew his final breath. The cosmos itself seemed to mourn the passing of Odin. As his spirit faded into the ether, the Bifrost shimmered faintly, as though acknowledging the loss of its king. All across the 9 realms, there was silence, a silence that carried the weight of Odin's passing. Back in Asgard, the gods and warriors who had once stood tall now bowed their heads. There would be no revelry, no celebration. The All-Father had fallen, and with his death came the end of an era. Thor, now holding the mantle of power, rose to his feet, his heart heavy with grief. He knew that the time had come for him to take his father's place on the throne. But this was not the moment for reflection or sorrow. Surtur still lived, and Asgard remained in danger. With the strength of a new king, Thor lifted Mjolnir, the hammer of gods, and vowed to defend the realm, as Odin had before him. But even as he spoke those words, he knew the truth. The death of the All-Father had set events into motion that could not be undone. A new age was dawning for Asgard, and for Midgard, Earth, which lay in the shadow of Thor's new reign. Asgard had lost its king, and the cosmos trembled, knowing that the son of Odin now stood in his place. Thor stood at the edge of the throne room, the golden halls of Asgard stretching out before him. The vast expanse of the palace felt cold and distant now, its grandeur hollow in the wake of his father's death. The throne of the All-Father sat in the center of the room, a massive seat of power adorned with ancient runes, symbols of Odin's long reign. And now, that throne was Thor's burden to bear. The realm was quiet, but the silence was not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that followed a great storm, heavy, filled with the tension of what might come next. Odin's death had left a void not just in Asgard, but in the cosmos itself. Thor could feel it, a subtle tremor that pulsed through the fabric of reality. The 9 realms awaited the ascension of their new ruler, but Thor's heart was conflicted. He had always been a warrior, a protector, and a god of thunder. But ruling was different. As he approached the throne, Mjolnir, his trusted hammer, felt heavy in his grip. Thor knew that once he took his place as All-Father, there would be no turning back. His days of battle, of standing shoulder to shoulder with his allies, would be behind him. The throne demanded wisdom, patience, and sacrifice, qualities Odin had cultivated over millennia. Thor wondered if he possessed them. The great doors of the throne room creaked open, and his mother, Frigga, entered. Her face, though serene, carried the same weight of loss that Thor felt in his heart. She approached her son, her eyes filled with both pride and sorrow. "The time has come, my son," she said softly, placing a hand on his arm. "You must take the throne. The realm needs its king." Thor turned to face her, his jaw clenched. "I am not ready, mother. How could I be? Odin, he was the greatest of us all. How can I follow in his footsteps?" Frigga's gaze softened. No one is ever truly ready, Thor. Not even your father was when the mantle fell to him. But he grew into his role, and so will you. Thor looked back at the throne, feeling the weight of his destiny pressing down on him. His entire life had been leading to this moment, yet it felt wrong. The warrior within him raged against the stillness of leadership. He had always believed that he would rule one day, but not like this, not with the shadow of his father's death looming over him. As if sensing his turmoil, Frigga spoke again. Your father had faith in you. He believed you were destined for greatness. But greatness, my son, does not come from wielding power. It comes from how you wield your heart. Odin knew that you would not rule like him, and that is why you will be the king Asgard needs. Thor let out a slow breath, nodding. He stepped toward the throne, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. He could hear the faint echoes of those who had come before him, ancient kings and queens of Asgard, their spirits watching, waiting for him to take his place among them. As he reached the throne, he paused. Before he could sit, a shimmering light filled the room, and from it emerged the spectral form of Odin. Thor's breath caught in his throat as he saw his father standing before him, bathed in a soft glow, his form ethereal but unmistakable. My son, Odin's voice rumbled, deep and resonant. The time has come for you to ascend, but you must understand this throne is not a reward. It is not a prize to be claimed. It is a burden, a responsibility that will weigh on your soul for as long as you rule. Thor bowed his head, humbled by his father's presence. Father, I do not know if I am worthy of this. Odin's gaze was stern, yet there was warmth behind it. Worthiness is not something you are given. It is something you prove day by day, choice by choice. You have the strength of a warrior, the heart of a hero, but to be a king, you must have the wisdom to guide and protect all of Asgard and all of the realms. Thor's grip on Mjolnir tightened. He could feel the weight of his father's words, the gravity of what lay ahead. He had faced many foes, but none as daunting as the responsibility of ruling. Still, he knew there was no turning back. This was his destiny, and he would face it as he had every challenge before, with honor and courage. Odin's form began to fade, but his voice lingered. Asgard needs its king. The realms need you, Thor. Do not let fear cloud your heart. Trust in yourself as I have trusted in you. And with that, Odin was gone, leaving Thor alone before the throne. The silence returned, but now it was different, more resolute, filled with a sense of purpose. Thor took a deep breath and finally sat upon the throne. The golden light of Asgard's halls shimmered around him, and as he settled into the seat, the power of the All-Father began to flow through him. In that moment, Thor felt the true weight of the mantle of power. It was not just the throne, nor the crown that signified his rule. It was the unspoken promise to protect not only Asgard but all of the realms, to guide them through whatever challenges lay ahead. He was not just a god of thunder anymore. He was the king of Asgard, the protector of the 9 realms. The room's doors opened once more, and the council of Asgard entered. Warriors, nobles, and gods alike. All eyes were on Thor as they approached. Among them was Loki, standing quietly in the shadows, his expression unreadable. Thor's gaze met his brother's, and for a brief moment, they regarded each other in silence. There was no malice in Loki's eyes this time, only a quiet understanding of what Thor now carried. Thor raised Mjolnir, and the council knelt before him, swearing their loyalty to their new king. The moment was solemn, but it was also the beginning of a new chapter for Asgard. Thor would lead them just as Odin had, but his path would be different. He would shape his reign with his own vision, his own heart. As Thor looked out over his people, a single thought echoed in his mind. The nine realms needed him now more than ever. The balance of the cosmos was delicate, and with the death of Odin, cracks were beginning to form in the fabric of reality. Thor knew that his reign would be filled with challenges, both seen and unseen. But he was ready. With the power of the All-Father coursing through him, he would protect the realms, even if it meant making choices that would test his very soul. Thor sat upon the throne, the weight of the All-Father's mantle pressing heavily upon him. The golden halls of Asgard shimmered with the light of the eternal stars, but despite the grandeur around him, his thoughts were clouded with uncertainty. The death of Odin had left a void not only in Asgard but in the cosmos itself. Now, as the new ruler, Thor felt the responsibility to not only fill that void but to reshape Asgard into a realm that could thrive under his rule. In the days following his ascension, Thor spent much time in solitude, contemplating what kind of king he would become. He walked the length of the Rainbow Bridge alone, gazing out over the vast expanse of the cosmos. Midgard, the realm of mortals, lingered in his thoughts. Earth had always held a special place in his heart. Unlike Odin, who had maintained a distant watch over the humans, Thor had fought alongside them, bled for them, and formed bonds with the Avengers. But now his role had changed. He was no longer just a warrior or a hero, he was a ruler, and Asgard was his priority. Thor's vision for Asgard began to take shape in his mind. The nine realms had been ravaged by war for centuries, and with Odin's passing, instability was already brewing. Thor knew that if Asgard was to survive, it needed to be stronger, more unified. But his vision went beyond merely protecting Asgard. He saw an empire that could encompass all the realms, including Earth. To him, the protection of Midgard could no longer be left solely to the Avengers or to humanity itself. Earth needed to be brought under the fold of Asgard, not as a subjugated world, but as an equal part of a greater whole, a unified empire of realms under Asgard's leadership. Thor gathered the Council of Asgard to share his thoughts. The great chamber was filled with the most powerful and respected leaders of the realm, warriors, nobles, and gods, each representing the different factions of Asgardian society. The tension in the room was palpable as Thor took his place at the head of the table, Mjolnir resting beside him. "I have thought long on what Asgard must become," Thor began, his voice deep and commanding. "The nine realms are fractured, divided by centuries of war and distrust. We have fought too many battles on our own soil, and now, with my father's death, the enemies of Asgard will sense weakness. They will seek to exploit it." The council members murmured amongst themselves. Thor's words rang true. The nine realms had always been a delicate balance, and with Odin gone, that balance was at risk of collapsing. To ensure the survival of Asgard, Thor continued, "We must do more than defend our borders. We must unite the realms, bring them under one banner, not through conquest but through strength and leadership. Asgard must become an empire that spans the cosmos, where all the realms are equal, but united under our protection." A murmur of surprise spread through the council. The idea of expanding Asgard's influence beyond its traditional role as protector of the nine realms was bold, perhaps too bold for some. One of the elder council members, a stern-faced warrior named Vidar, spoke up. "And what of Earth, my king? The mortals have their own champions, their own ways. Would you bring them under Asgard's rule as well?" Thor's gaze settled on Vidar, his expression unwavering. "Midgard is vulnerable. They face threats that they cannot comprehend. Enemies from beyond the stars, forces of magic, and chaos that they are ill-prepared to handle. I have fought beside the Avengers, and they are mighty, but even they cannot face what lies ahead alone. If Earth is to survive, it must be a part of something greater. I would not rule Midgard as a tyrant. I would protect it as I have always done, but under the banner of Asgard, so that its people can flourish without fear of the unknown. Loki, who had remained silent until now, leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with interest. "And how, brother, do you propose to bring the mortals into this empire of yours? They do not take kindly to gods who interfere in their affairs. You may find that Midgard is not so easily swayed." Thor met his brother's gaze, knowing the truth in his words. The people of Earth were proud, independent, and often wary of outside influence. But Thor's resolve did not waver. "I will not force them into submission," Thor replied, "but I will show them that joining with Asgard is the only way to secure their future. I have fought for Midgard. I will fight for it again if necessary. But this time, I will fight not as one of them, but as their protector, under the crown of Asgard." The council fell into a heavy silence, each member processing the enormity of Thor's vision. Some were clearly uneasy with the idea of expansion, especially involving Earth, while others saw the merit in his plan. Asgard had long been the center of power in the Nine Realms, but Thor was proposing something far more ambitious: a unification of worlds under Asgardian guidance. Frigga, ever the voice of wisdom, spoke next. "My son, your vision is bold, but boldness alone cannot forge an empire. The realms are not as they once were. There is distrust, old wounds that will not easily heal. To unite them, you must show not only strength but compassion. They must see Asgard not as a conqueror, but as a guide, a protector that seeks the well-being of all." Thor nodded, her words aligning with the heart of his plan. "I do not seek conquest, Mother. I seek unity. The Nine Realms need peace, and they need a leader who can provide it. I will be that leader. I will wield the power of the All-Father, not to subjugate, but to uplift." As the council debated the merits of Thor's proposal, Loki sat back in his chair, his eyes calculating. He knew his brother's vision was grand, but he also understood the challenges it would bring. Midgard would not be easily convinced, and the other realms, especially those that had long resisted Asgard's influence, would not simply fall in line. But in Loki's mind, there was opportunity in chaos, and he began to wonder how he might play a part in this new order Thor sought to create. Days turned into weeks as Thor worked to solidify his vision. He met with the leaders of the Nine Realms, traveling through the Bifrost to speak with each of them personally. Some, like Vanaheim and Alfheim, were open to his ideas, seeing the benefits of uniting under a strong leader like Thor. Others, like Jotunheim, were less trusting, their wounds from past conflicts with Asgard still fresh. Yet Thor's determination never faltered. He knew that forging an empire would not happen overnight, but he also knew that the alternative, a fractured cosmos, would lead to ruin. Meanwhile, on Earth, the Avengers began to sense that Thor's role in the realm of mortals was changing. He was no longer simply their ally. He was a king now, with a vision that extended beyond the battlefield. As whispers of Thor's plans for Asgard's expansion reached Midgard, tensions began to rise. The Avengers had fought beside Thor countless times, but now they wondered if their friend was becoming something they might one day have to oppose. Thor's vision for Asgard continued to grow in his mind, a vision of peace through strength, of unity through leadership. He would forge a new future for the realms, but in doing so, he would also face challenges that no All-Father before him had ever encountered. The road ahead was uncertain, and Thor knew that not all would accept his rule easily. But with Mjolnir in hand and the power of the All-Father coursing through him, he was ready to face whatever came next. The winds of change swept through Midgard like a storm, and Thor could feel the tension building as he prepared to execute the next phase of his grand vision. Earth had always been a chaotic realm, filled with its own conflicts, pride, and independence. But Thor believed that under Asgard's protection, it could become something far greater. The The time had come to bring Midgard into the fold of the new Asgardian Empire, yet deep down, Thor knew that not all would accept this unification willingly. His arrival on Earth was not marked by a grand announcement, but by the quiet approach of Asgard's forces. Thor understood the fragile nature of human politics and sought not to inspire panic, but his presence did not go unnoticed. He had been a protector of Midgard for so long that his sudden shift from ally to ruler unsettled many. The Avengers were among the first to respond. They had fought beside him countless times, but now, as he descended to Earth with his army, they could see in his eyes that something had changed. He was no longer just Thor, their friend and comrade. He was the All-Father, the ruler of Asgard, with a vision that could shape or break the future of Earth. As Thor's forces began their operations on Midgard, it became clear that his intentions were not mere diplomacy. The armies of Asgard spread throughout key cities, and the Bifrost, the Rainbow Bridge, shimmered across the sky, signaling the arrival of more Asgardian troops. Their presence was not hostile, but it was undeniable. Asgard was not just a protector now, it was an occupying force. The goal was to secure Earth as a part of the Asgardian Empire, bringing it under Thor's vision of unity and peace through strength. At the heart of this growing tension, the governments of Earth were divided. Some viewed Asgard as a savior, a force that could help protect them from the ever-growing threats that Earth faced, from alien invasions to the rise of superhuman conflicts. Others, however, saw this as an occupation, a threat to their sovereignty. Secret meetings were held among world leaders, and while some were willing to negotiate, others began to prepare for resistance. In New York, the Avengers gathered at their headquarters, the situation weighing heavily on their minds. Captain America, ever the symbol of freedom and independence, stood with his arms crossed, gazing out of a window toward the Bifrost that glimmered faintly in the distance. "This isn't like him," Steve Rogers said, his voice low but firm. "Thor's always fought for Earth, for our freedom. But now he's bringing an army. This isn't protection, it's control." Tony Stark, sitting nearby in his Iron Man suit, shook his head in frustration. "I don't know, Cap. Maybe he's right. We've seen the kind of threats that are out there, the Chitauri, Thanos, Ultron. Maybe Earth could use Asgard's protection, whether we like it or not." Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow, chimed in, her expression unreadable. "Protection doesn't mean submission. If we give up our freedom now, what happens when Thor starts making decisions for us? For the whole planet?" The debate among the Avengers reflected the growing unrest on Earth. Some, like Tony, saw the merit in Thor's vision, an empire where Earth could be shielded from the cosmic dangers that constantly loomed on the horizon. But others, like Steve, could not abide by the idea of Earth being ruled by an outside force, even one as powerful and well-meaning as Asgard. As days passed, Thor made his intentions clear. He appeared before the United Nations, standing tall in his royal Asgardian armor, with Mjolnir in hand. His words were measured, yet they carried the weight of authority that could not be ignored. "People of Earth," Thor's voice echoed across the assembly, "I have fought for your realm, bled for it, defended it against enemies beyond your comprehension. Now, as the All-Father of Asgard, I offer you more than just protection. I offer you a place in a united empire of realms, where peace and strength will reign. Together, we can forge a future where no enemy, no invader, can threaten you. But this future requires more than trust. It requires unity under Asgard's leadership." While many world leaders were hesitant to oppose Thor outright, there were murmurs of defiance among the assembly. Resistance was already brewing. Earth's sovereignty was not something its people were willing to give up easily. The Avengers, unable to reach a consensus among themselves, began to fracture under the strain of the situation. While some, like Tony and Thor's old allies, Valkyrie and Sif, advocated for a diplomatic solution. Others, especially Steve and Natasha, believed that the only way to preserve Earth's freedom was to resist. A pivotal moment came when Thor, in an effort to show his strength, dispatched Asgardian forces to secure strategic locations around the globe. The city of Washington, D.C., found itself under Asgardian control within days, its skies filled with the gleaming ships of Asgard's fleet. At first, the occupation was peaceful. There were no direct acts of aggression, but the show of force was enough to stoke the fires of rebellion. The people of Earth began to protest, fearful of the implications of this new rule. The Avengers, now divided into factions, found themselves at odds. Tony Stark, despite his initial reluctance, ultimately decided to stand against Thor's empire after seeing the growing unrest among the people. Steve, as always, stood firm in his belief that Earth must remain free, but it was Thor's next move that truly ignited the fires of resistance. In a bold display of power, Thor summoned the elements, darkening the skies over the capital and unleashing a storm the likes of which Earth had never seen. Lightning cracked across the heavens, and thunder rumbled so loudly it shook the ground. It was not an act of war but a demonstration, a reminder to Earth's leaders that the gods had returned, and their power was absolute. But this show of force did not have the desired effect. Instead of cowering in fear, the people of Earth, inspired by heroes like Captain America, began to fight back. Resistance movements sprang up across the globe, and cities that had once welcomed Asgardian rule now became hotbeds of rebellion. Armed with human technology and the determination to preserve their autonomy, the people of Earth stood against the might of Asgard. The Avengers, though torn apart by differing ideologies, found themselves at the forefront of this resistance. Steve Rogers, in his classic uniform, led teams of freedom fighters in guerrilla operations, targeting Asgardian strongholds and supply lines. Natasha Romanoff, ever the spy, coordinated covert strikes to undermine Asgardian authority from within. Tensions escalated rapidly. Earth's resistance grew bolder by the day, and despite his reluctance, Thor found himself facing open defiance. Asgardian forces were forced to engage in skirmishes with human rebels, and blood was spilled on both sides. In the midst of the conflict, Thor began to question the path he had chosen. He had never intended for Earth to become a battlefield, but the resistance of its people was fiercer than he had anticipated. His heart, once so sure of the righteousness of his cause, began to waver. Could he truly unite the realms through force? Or had he underestimated the indomitable will of Midgard's people? The skies over Midgard, once blue and open, had become a war zone filled with streaks of lightning, bursts of fire, and the cacophony of battle. Thor's decision to annex Earth into the Asgardian Empire had led to the breaking point, where words had failed and conflict now determined the fate of the planet. The Asgardian armies had fully mobilized, sending their elite warriors, enchanted beasts, and powerful sorcerers into the heart of Earth's cities. The Avengers, Earth's most trusted defenders, stood their ground, preparing for the most consequential battle of their lives, one that would decide the future of their home. As the forces converged, Midgard shook beneath the weight of armies clashing in its streets. New York City became the epicenter of the battle, its towering skyscrapers dwarfed by the celestial might of Asgard. The people of Earth were no strangers to alien invasions, but this was different. This time, their protector had become their oppressor. Thor stood at the front lines, Mjolnir in hand, his cape billowing in the storm he had summoned to announce Asgard's dominance. His eyes glowed with the power of the All-Father, but his heart was heavy. He had believed that this was the right course of action, that Earth would thrive under Asgard's rule. But now, facing the very people he had sworn to protect, doubt began to creep into his mind. Still, he could not falter. Asgard's future and that of the realms depended on his leadership. Opposing him were the Avengers, led by Captain America, who stood tall with his shield gleaming, his determination unshaken. His comrades were ready, though they knew the gravity of what they were about to face. Stark hovered above the battlefield in his Iron Man suit, scanning for weak points in Asgard's forces. Black Widow, Hawkeye, and Ant-Man took positions on the ground, blending into the urban landscape, their sharp eyes watching every move. Behind them, the people of New York looked on in horror, some fleeing for safety, while others stood their ground, unwilling to let their city fall without a fight. The battle began with an explosion of power. Thor, calling down a devastating bolt of lightning, sent it crashing into the heart of the city. Buildings crumbled beneath the force, but the Avengers had already scattered, moving with the precision of a well-oiled machine. Tony launched himself into the air, firing a barrage of repulsor blasts at Thor, who blocked them with ease, Mjolnir spinning in his hand like a hurricane. Thor retaliated, sending shockwaves through the air with each strike of his hammer. But Iron Man's agility kept him one step ahead, drawing Thor's attention while the others moved into position. On the ground, Captain America led the charge, rallying the remaining forces of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the scattered resistance fighters. Steve Rogers had faced gods before, but he had never fought one so intimately tied to his own sense of brotherhood. With grim resolve, he charged into battle, his shield raised high, deflecting the energy blasts and enchanted weapons that rained down from Asgard soldiers. As Thor's forces descended, Steve's voice rang out over the chaos. "Hold the line," he shouted, his voice cutting through the noise of battle. "We fight for Earth." The resistance fighters responded, their spirits lifted by his leadership. Together, they formed a wall of defense, driving back Asgardian warriors with sheer determination. But it was not enough. As the battle raged on, the superior might of Asgard became clear. The Einherjar, elite warriors from the halls of Valhalla, tore through the streets with unrelenting ferocity. Armed with celestial weapons, they cut through tanks, crumbled buildings, and pushed back the resistance with ease. S.H.I.E.L.D.'s aircraft fell from the sky, their technology no match for Asgardian magic. But the Avengers were no strangers to impossible odds. As Thor and Iron Man clashed above, a smaller strike force led by Black Widow and Hawkeye infiltrated the Asgardian strongholds scattered throughout the city. Using stealth and guile, they targeted the enchanted runes that powered Asgard's defenses, disabling them one by one. Each time a barrier fell, the resistance fighters surged forward, gaining ground inch by inch. Meanwhile, the battle between Thor and Iron Man escalated into the skies above New York. Tony knew that Thor's power as the Allfather far exceeded what he had faced before. His armor, upgraded with the latest technology, barely withstood the impact of Thor's blows. But Tony Stark had never been one to back down. Using the full force of his repulsors, he fired a concentrated blast at Thor, sending him crashing into the side of a skyscraper. But Thor emerged unscathed, lightning crackling around him as he raised Mjolnir to the heavens once more. "You cannot win this, Stark," Thor said, his voice resonating with the authority of a king. "Asgard will reign, and Earth will be safer under my rule." Tony, breathing heavily inside his suit, responded, "Maybe, but we don't want to be ruled." With a powerful roar, Thor unleashed another barrage of lightning, but this time Tony was ready. Channeling all of his armor's energy into a single shot, he fired a beam of concentrated energy at Thor. The two forces collided in midair, creating a shockwave that shook the entire city. For a brief moment, the two seemed evenly matched, But Thor's divine power began to overpower Tony's technology. The energy beam dissipated, and Thor closed the distance, smashing Mjolnir into Tony's chest with such force that it sent him plummeting toward the ground. As Iron Man crashed into the streets below, Steve Rogers sprinted toward him, his shield deflecting debris as it rained down. Thor descended from the sky, landing with a thunderous boom. He looked at his fallen comrades, his expression conflicted. "Why do you resist me?" Thor asked, his voice laced with frustration. "I have only ever fought to protect this world." Steve stood, his shield still raised. "We know that, Thor, but this isn't protection. This is conquest." Thor's grip on Mjolnir tightened, his gaze shifting from Steve to the destruction around them. For a moment, silence hung in the air, broken only by the distant sounds of battle. But before Thor could respond, the ground beneath them trembled. The Hulk had arrived. With a roar that shook the heavens, Bruce Banner, fully transformed into the Hulk, barreled into Thor with the force of a freight train. The two titans collided, the impact sending shockwaves across the battlefield. Buildings crumbled, and the streets cracked as the Hulk and Thor engaged in a battle of sheer power. Thor swung Mjolnir, but the Hulk caught it mid-swing, their strength evenly matched. The city trembled as they exchanged blow after blow, neither willing to back down. As the fight raged on, the Avengers continued their efforts to weaken Asgard's hold on Earth. Black Widow and Hawkeye, having infiltrated one of Asgard's command centers, activated a series of EMPs designed to disrupt the magical communication between Asgardian forces. Across the battlefield, Asgard's warriors found themselves cut off from their leaders, their coordination faltering. Sensing an opportunity, Captain America rallied the remaining resistance fighters. "Now's our chance. Push forward." With renewed vigor, the resistance surged, overwhelming the disoriented Asgardian forces. For the first time since the battle began, it seemed that Earth's defenders might have a chance. But Thor, locked in combat with the Hulk, was far from finished. Summoning the full might of the All-Father, he unleashed a torrent of lightning that engulfed the Hulk, forcing the green behemoth to his knees. With a final, devastating blow, Thor struck the Hulk down, leaving him motionless on the ground. As he stood over his fallen friend, Thor's expression was one of sorrow. "I did not want this," Thor whispered, his voice heavy with regret. But before he could contemplate further, Steve Rogers, battered but unbroken, stepped forward once again. "Thor," Steve said, his voice firm but pleading, "you can still stop this. You don't have to be our enemy." Thor, standing over the battlefield like a god of war, looked down at Steve, the man who had always been his equal in heart, if not in power. For a moment, doubt flickered in Thor's eyes, but it was quickly overshadowed by the weight of his new responsibilities. "I have no choice, Steve," Thor replied, his voice booming with the authority of the All-Father. "Asgard's future demands this. Earth will thrive under my rule, and I will not allow anyone to stand in my way." With a heavy heart, Thor raised Mjolnir high, the skies answering his call with a deafening crack of thunder. Before Steve could react, Thor brought his hammer down with incredible force, sending a shockwave through the battlefield. The ground beneath Captain America's feet shattered, and the blast sent him flying backward, his shield vibrating from the impact. He landed hard, his body limp and motionless as the battlefield went silent for a brief moment. The sight of Captain America falling was too much for the remaining Avengers. Hope seemed to wane as Thor's forces closed in on all sides. Black Widow and Hawkeye, still fighting from the shadows, found themselves surrounded by Einherjar warriors, their arrows and bullets ineffective against the enchanted armor of their foes. Natasha fought with everything she had, her agility and skill allowing her to evade the deadly strikes of Asgardian blades. But even she knew it was only a matter of time before she was overwhelmed. Hawkeye, standing back to back with her, fired arrow after arrow, his quiver nearly empty. "Nat," he said through gritted teeth, "we're running out of options here." Natasha didn't respond, her focus entirely on staying alive. But she knew he was right. There were no more tricks, no more clever tactics that could turn the tide. The Avengers were falling, one by one, and the battle was slipping from their grasp. As the Asgardian forces pressed their advantage, the Hulk, still reeling from his previous battle with Thor, let out a roar of defiance. His massive form charged through the streets, smashing anything in his path, sending Asgardian soldiers flying. But even the Hulk, with all his rage and strength, couldn't hold back the tide. Thor, knowing that the Hulk was the last real threat standing between him and victory, descended from the sky, landing in front of the green behemoth. "Banner," Thor said, his voice calm but resolute. "You fought bravely, but it's over." The Hulk, undeterred, charged at Thor, his fists clenched in fury. But Thor, now fully in control of his godlike power, met the Hulk head-on. Mjolnir collided with the Hulk's fist, and the impact shook the earth. The two titans exchanged blows, their battle devastating the surrounding cityscape. But Thor, drawing upon the Odin force, began to overwhelm the Hulk. With a final, crushing blow, Thor struck the Hulk down, his body collapsing into the rubble. For the first time, the Hulk did not get up. With the Hulk defeated and the Avengers scattered, the battle for Midgard was all but lost. Iron Man lay unconscious, his armor shattered. Black Widow and Hawkeye were captured, bound by Asgardian chains. The city was in ruins, and the last remnants of resistance had been snuffed out. Thor stood among the destruction, surveying the battlefield. He had won, but the victory felt hollow. The Avengers, his former allies, lay broken at his feet. The people of Earth, the very beings he had sworn to protect, now looked upon him with fear and hatred. But Thor pushed those thoughts aside. He had done what needed to be done for Asgard, for the realms, and for the future of all. As the Asgardian warships descended, their massive forms blotting out the sun, Thor raised Mjolnir to the sky once more. A beam of energy shot from the hammer, signaling the end of the battle and the beginning of Asgard's rule over Midgard. The city fell silent, the resistance crushed, and the Avengers defeated. But as Thor stood in the ruins of New York, one final figure emerged from the shadows, Loki, his brother, with a mischievous smile on his face. "Well, brother," Loki said, his voice smooth and mocking, "it seems you've finally done it. You've won. But at what cost?" Thor didn't respond, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He knew that this was only the beginning, that the true challenges of ruling both Asgard and Earth had yet to come. And though he had defeated the Avengers, the consequences of his actions would soon ripple across the realms, bringing with them new dangers and new trials. For now, though Thor stood alone in his victory, the All-Father of Asgard and the new ruler of Earth, but deep within him, a seed of doubt had begun to take root, one that would grow as the days passed and the full weight of his choices became clear. The throne room of Asgard, once a place of majesty and reverence, had transformed into a chamber of shadows and whispers. Thor, now king, sat upon the throne that had once belonged to Odin, his brow furrowed in deep thought. The golden walls, lined with the glorious tales of their forebears, felt oppressive to him. He had taken Midgard, had conquered the Avengers, yet in doing so, he had traded his old life for a crown heavy with the burden of ruling two worlds. As the echoes of celebration from the Asgardian court faded into the background, a different presence emerged. Loki, god of mischief, stood in the shadows, his green cloak billowing like a wisp of smoke. A sly smile crept across his face as he watched his brother, his thoughts filled with schemes and ambitions of his own. The game had changed, and Loki saw an opportunity, one that might tilt the scales back in his favor. "Thor," Loki called out, stepping into the light. His voice was smooth, laced with an almost playful tone. "How splendid it is to see you seated upon our father's throne. Yet I sense a darkness festering within you." Thor looked up, annoyance flickering in his eyes. "Loki, now is not the time for your games. We are in a new era, and I have a kingdom to secure. What do you want?" "Oh, dear brother, it's not what I want but what you need," Loki replied, a glint of mischief dancing in his gaze. "You have brought Midgard into our fold, but have you considered what it means to rule them? They see you as a tyrant, not a king." Thor's jaw clenched. He had taken the throne to protect Asgard and its interests, but he could not deny the truth in Loki's words. The people of Midgard were not subdued. They were resentful, fearful, and simmering with rebellion. His heart felt heavy, and uncertainty began to gnaw at him. "And what would you have me do?" Loki stepped closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I have a plan, a way to unite the realms under your banner, to quell the unrest without bloodshed. But it requires a delicate touch and a willingness to embrace a little subterfuge." Intrigued yet wary, Thor leaned forward. "Speak plainly, Loki. What do you propose?" Loki's smile widened, and he began to weave a tale of deception. He spoke of a false rebellion, a carefully orchestrated conflict that would draw the attention of the Avengers and the heroes of Midgard back into the fold. "We create a scenario that will rally the people behind you, a show of strength to demonstrate that you are not their enemy but their protector." "And how do you intend to convince them?" Thor asked, skepticism lacing his tone. "They've seen the destruction. They've seen me fight my friends." Loki waved a dismissive hand, his confidence unwavering. "A performance, brother. We can fabricate a threat, one that appears so dire that even the most obstinate Midgardian will see the wisdom in your rule. You will crush this threat and emerge as their savior." Thor pondered the proposal. It was cunning, audacious, and filled with the potential for chaos. Yet deep within him, a voice protested. He did not want to rule through deceit or manipulation, nor did he wish to plunge his people into more strife. "And what is the cost of your plan, Loki?" "The cost is simple," Loki replied, leaning in closer, his voice dripping with allure. "You must trust me even if it means allowing me to play my tricks. In return, I will ensure that the Avengers remain distracted and that any signs of rebellion are quashed before they can take root." Thor knew the risks of trusting Loki, yet the thought of losing control over both Asgard and Midgard weighed heavily on him. With a heavy heart, he finally nodded. "Very well, Loki, but I will not lose sight of who you are. If your gambit fails, you will answer to me." "Ah, but it won't fail, dear brother," Loki assured him, his smile widening as he stepped back into the shadows, his mind already racing with plans. "Now let us set the stage." Days turned into weeks as Loki set his plan in motion. He began to sow the seeds of discord, using his powers of illusion and deception to create a fabricated enemy, a rogue faction of Asgardians who claimed to oppose Thor's rule. These false rebels were mere puppets, controlled by Loki's magic and designed to lure the attention of the true heroes. Thor, meanwhile, attempted to maintain a semblance of order in Asgard while addressing the rising tensions among the Midgardians. Reports of unrest trickled in, tales of protests and riots that spoke of the people's growing discontent with his regime. He struggled to balance his duties as king and the haunting fear of becoming the very tyrant he had sought to eliminate. But Loki's deception soon bore fruit. News of the supposed rebellion reached the ears of the Avengers, who, sensing a new threat to the safety of Midgard, began to investigate. Captain America, Black Widow, and Hawkeye formed a small team, intent on uncovering the truth behind the rumors. They approached the matter with skepticism, knowing Loki's history, but the threat of a rising faction in Asgard was too great to ignore. As the Avengers delved deeper, they uncovered traces of Loki's illusions, a trail of confusion and misdirection that only heightened their suspicions of a deeper conspiracy at play. The heroes began to prepare for a confrontation, believing that Thor was once again under Loki's influence and that a showdown with their former ally was inevitable. While the Avengers plotted their course, Thor found himself in a precarious position. He began to sense Loki's hand in the chaos that was unfolding. The tension in the air thickened as his brother's influence permeated the very foundation of his rule. Though the deception was meant to protect him, Thor felt as though he were being cornered, pushed into a trap of his own making. One fateful night, as the skies darkened over Asgard, the stage was set for confrontation. Loki had orchestrated the perfect storm, and Thor stood at the precipice of his own ambition. With the Avengers gathering their forces and the illusion of rebellion growing stronger, the time had come for Thor to decide whether to embrace Loki's gambit or to stand firm in the truth of his heart. As the Avengers made their move, the lines between ally and enemy blurred. In this Game of Thrones, where deceit was the only currency, Thor would be forced to confront not only his brother's treachery, but the very essence of his own identity as a king. The clash of ideals and ambitions loomed on the horizon, ready to ignite a conflict that would determine the fate of both Asgard and Midgard, and the ultimate price of power would soon be revealed. The realm of Midgard, once filled with bustling cities and serene countrysides, now stood in the shadow of Asgardian rule. The skies above were pierced by the presence of Asgard's mighty floating fortresses, their shimmering golden spires casting an ethereal glow on the world below. Thor had conquered Midgard, incorporating it into the Asgardian Empire, but the hearts of its people remained defiant. As the days passed, the people of Earth grew more restless. Thor's once noble intentions of uniting Asgard and Midgard had become a burden for the mortals, who had grown weary of being subjects in a god's kingdom. The laws of Asgard, foreign and often harsh to the human way of life, had begun to take their toll on society. Many humans resented their new rulers, questioning why they should bow to a god who had taken their world by force. In secret, whispers of rebellion spread like wildfire. Leaders from various factions across the globe began to organize, rallying those who opposed Asgardian dominance. Former military officers, political leaders, and even civilians who had once stood on the sidelines now banded together, united by a single goal: to free Midgard from Asgard's grip. Among these leaders was Steve Rogers, Captain America, who had gone underground following the defeat of the Avengers. He had watched as Thor rose to power, but now he could no longer stay silent. Though he once called Thor a friend, Steve could not stand by while Earth suffered under the weight of tyranny. His iconic shield, once a symbol of hope, now symbolized the defiance of an entire planet. As resistance grew, so too did Asgard's awareness of the growing unrest. Thor, seated upon the throne of Asgard, gazed down upon Midgard from the heavens. His advisors, sensing the growing tension, urged him to act swiftly, to crush the rebellion before it could take root. But Thor hesitated. He had no desire to wage war upon the very people he sought to protect. Loki, ever the schemer, stood at Thor's side, his eyes gleaming with amusement. "Brother," he said, his voice dripping with suggestion, "these mortals will never accept your rule. They are not like us. They will always resist what they do not understand. You must act or risk losing everything you have gained. Thor's gaze remained fixed on Midgard, a storm brewing in his heart. He had fought to protect Earth, fought alongside the Avengers for years. But now, his rule had made him an enemy in the eyes of those he once called allies. Torn between his duty to Asgard and his love for Midgard, he knew the time for a decision was near. The first act of open rebellion came in New York, where a coordinated attack against Asgardian forces caught them off guard. Human forces, armed with weapons enhanced by stolen Stark technology and modified alien artifacts, struck at key Asgardian outposts. The rebels moved with precision, hitting supply lines and communication hubs, all while avoiding direct confrontation with Asgard's most powerful warriors. Captain America, leading the charge, moved through the shadows, guiding his fellow rebels with a tactical mind sharper than ever. His experience in battle gave the resistance a much-needed edge, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though the people of Midgard might have a chance. But Asgard's forces were not so easily defeated. Word of the rebellion reached Thor quickly, and he dispatched his loyal warriors to crush the uprising. The warriors three, Fandral, Hogun, and Volstagg, were among those sent to deal with the rebel leaders. They descended upon New York with the fury of gods, their enchanted weapons cutting through human defenses with ease. Despite their courage, the rebels were no match for the Asgardians. They fought bravely, but in the face of divine power, their numbers dwindled. Destruction spread through the city as buildings crumbled and fires raged. The people of Earth, watching in horror, realized that their resistance might cost them everything. In the midst of battle, Captain America confronted Fandral, his shield clashing against the Asgardian sword. The two warriors exchanged blows, their movements swift and calculated. Though Fandral's strength far surpassed that of any mortal, Steve fought with the unyielding determination that had made him a symbol of hope. He would not let Midgard fall, not without a fight. But Fandral, sensing the hopelessness of the human cause, sought to end the conflict quickly. With a powerful swing of his sword, he disarmed Steve, sending his shield flying through the air. Captain America fell to his knees, breathless and beaten, but his spirit remained unbroken. "Yield, mortal," Fandral said, his voice calm but commanding. "You cannot win this war. Surrender now, and you may yet live." Steve, his body battered but his resolve unwavering, looked up at the Asgardian warrior. "I fight not for victory, but for freedom. As long as I stand, Midgard will never yield." Before Fandral could strike the final blow, a massive thunderclap echoed across the battlefield. Lightning split the sky, and from the heavens descended Thor, his mighty hammer Mjolnir crackling with energy. He landed between Steve and Fandral, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sorrow. "Enough," Thor commanded, his voice booming with authority. "This war ends now." Fandral stepped back, bowing his head in deference. "As you command, my king." Thor turned to Steve, his gaze heavy with regret. "I never wished for this, Rogers. I never wanted to be your enemy." Steve, still kneeling, looked up at his old friend, his voice filled with quiet defiance. "Then why did you make yourself one? You've become the very thing we fought against." Thor's heart clenched at the words. He had tried to bring order to protect both Asgard and Midgard, but in doing so, he had lost the trust of those he held dear. He extended a hand to Steve, helping him to his feet. "I cannot undo what has been done," Thor said softly, "but I can still make things right." As Thor spoke, the rebellion across Midgard continued to grow. More cities rose in defiance, inspired by the bravery of the resistance in New York. The human spirit, resilient and unbroken, refused to bow to the gods. But Thor knew that the longer the conflict dragged on, the more lives would be lost. He had a choice to make, one that would define the future of both Asgard and Midgard. Would he crush the rebellion with the full might of his power, Or would he seek another path, one that might offer peace, even at great personal cost? As the fires of rebellion burned brighter, Thor stood at a crossroads, torn between his duty as a king and the bonds of friendship that still lingered in his heart. The fate of two realms rested upon his next decision, and the gods watched in silence, knowing that whatever choice he made would echo through the ages. The air crackled with tension as the final confrontation loomed over Asgard. Thor, now burdened by the weight of his decisions, stood upon the precipice of the Bifrost, staring into the swirling colors of the cosmos. The heavens themselves seemed to hold their breath, awaiting the outcome of this trial, one that would not only determine his fate but the fate of both Asgard and Midgard. With the rebel forces still active in Midgard, Thor's heart was heavy with the knowledge that his rule was challenged on all sides. Yet it was not just the rebels he had to contend with. His brother Loki, ever the trickster and schemer, lurked in the shadows, weaving plots that threatened to upend everything Thor had fought for. It was a precarious time, and Thor understood that the final trial ahead would test not only his strength but his very character. As Thor descended from the heights of Asgard, he summoned Mjolnir to his side. The hammer hummed with energy, an extension of his will, as he landed gracefully before the gathered council of Asgardian gods. They were a formidable assembly. The warriors three, Frigga, the wise and powerful queen, and other deities who had witnessed Thor's rise to power and now questioned his legitimacy. Each one bore a skeptical expression, wary of the turmoil that surrounded the young king. Thor, Odin's voice echoed through the gathering, though the All-Father himself was no longer present. His spirit, however, lingered in the air, guiding the proceedings. You stand at a crossroads. The rebellion in Midgard rages on, and your actions have driven a wedge between our two worlds. You must prove yourself worthy of the mantle of All-Father. The gravity of the moment weighed upon Thor. He had long desired to earn his place among the pantheon of gods, yet now that desire felt tainted by the chaos he had inadvertently caused. The council demanded a trial, a demonstration of his strength, wisdom, and ability to lead. It would not be enough to merely defeat his enemies. He must also display compassion and understanding. Your first trial, Odin's voice continued, is one of strength. You must face the might of your own warriors, those who once stood beside you. Prove that you can command respect not through fear, but through your actions. Thor stepped forward, Mjolnir gripped tightly in his hand. The arena was set upon the golden fields of Asgard, where legends had clashed before. One by one, the warriors three emerged from the ranks of the council. Fandral, with his quick blades and even quicker reflexes, was first to face Thor. The crowd hushed as the two warriors squared off, their history a tapestry of camaraderie and competition. With a nod of respect, the duel began. Fandral moved like a dancer, his swords a blur as they aimed for Thor's defenses. Thor countered with Mjolnir, the hammer deflecting blows with ease. Each clash of metal echoed through the arena, a symphony of battle. Fandral was skilled and agile, but Thor was resolute. He fought not to vanquish but to demonstrate his commitment to his people, to show that he had not forgotten his duty as a leader. As their duel reached its peak, Thor managed to disarm Fandral, knocking his swords from his hands and forcing him to the ground. But instead of delivering a final blow, Thor extended his hand to help his friend up. "You fought bravely as always," he said, a proud smile breaking through his serious demeanor. Next came Hogun, the stoic warrior whose strength was matched only by his unwavering loyalty. Their fight was a clash of titans, each strike sending shockwaves through the air. Hogun's relentless assault tested Thor's endurance, but Thor could feel the pulse of the realm in his veins, guiding him through the fury. They fought fiercely, but when Hogun finally fell to the ground, Thor knelt beside him, offering a hand. "We are brothers in arms, Hogun. Together we are stronger." The crowd roared in approval, recognizing Thor's spirit of unity, but the trial was not yet over. Volstagg, the last of the Warriors Three, stepped forward, his massive frame imposing. The audience held its breath, knowing Volstagg would not hold back. They engaged in a contest of strength, the two warriors grappling and trading blows, each move shaking the very ground they stood upon. Thor pushed against Volstagg's might, using every ounce of his power to stand firm. It was a struggle, one that seemed to go on for hours. But as Thor sensed Volstagg's determination and honor, he recalled their shared battles and laughter. In that moment, he redirected his strength, using his own might to elevate Volstagg and lift him from the ground. The gesture showcased Thor's ability to inspire, to lift his allies rather than crush them. As the final bout concluded, the council murmured in approval. Thor had proven his strength, but the second trial awaited. Odin's voice resounded once more, echoing through the arena. "The next trial is one of wisdom. You must confront the heart of your kingdom and choose a path that unites Asgard and Midgard." Thor stood before the council, contemplating the weight of his next actions. He was not merely a warrior, he was a king. His decisions could alter the fates of both realms forever. The council gathered around him, each deity waiting to see how he would address the turmoil he had caused. With resolve, Thor spoke. "I recognize that my actions have brought division. It was never my intent to rule through fear or might. I sought to protect both realms, but in my haste, I overlooked the voices of the people. Midgard is not merely a territory to conquer. It is home to many, deserving of respect and understanding. I must learn from them, to hear their grievances and work towards a solution together." His words hung in the air, resonating with the audience. Many among the council nodded, and even Loki, watching from the shadows, felt a twinge of something he had not anticipated: respect for Thor's willingness to grow. The gods knew that wisdom lay in recognizing one's faults, and Thor's acknowledgement of his missteps signified a change of heart. Odin's spirit nodded in approval, but the trial was not yet complete. The final test awaited, one that would determine Thor's true worthiness. The last trial is one of sacrifice. You must willingly put aside your desires for the good of Asgard and Midgard. This trial will test your heart and soul. The landscape shifted around Thor as the air thickened with uncertainty. He was transported to a vision of Midgard, where destruction reigned. The rebel forces, desperate and angry, clashed with the Asgardian warriors in a fight that threatened to consume the world. He watched as innocent lives were lost in the chaos, families torn apart by the conflict he had incited. The faces of the people, filled with fear and anguish, pierced his heart. In this vision, Thor saw a path, one where he could quell the rebellion, crush his enemies, and solidify his power. But in doing so, he would sacrifice the very thing he sought to protect: the love and trust of the people. The thought of ruling through fear filled him with dread. He felt the weight of their suffering and realized that he could not continue this way. Standing before the choice, he could feel the bonds of Midgard pulling at his heart. Thor understood that true leadership required sacrifice, but not in the form of oppression. He would not defeat the rebels with brute strength. Instead, he would offer them a chance for peace, a chance to rebuild and heal. With a determined heart, Thor declared, "I will not raise my hammer against the people of Midgard. I choose to embrace them as equals, to work together to forge a new alliance built on trust and respect. I sacrifice my desire for absolute power in favor of a partnership with those I once considered subjects." As the words left his lips, the vision of destruction dissipated, replaced by a vision of hope. He saw the rebels and Asgardians standing together, their hands clasped in unity. A new dawn broke over Midgard, the sun rising brightly on a world reborn. The council erupted in applause, the sound echoing throughout Asgard. Thor had faced his trials and emerged not only as a warrior but as a leader. He had proven his strength, wisdom, and the willingness to sacrifice for the greater good. Odin's spirit, now at peace, watched with pride. With the trials behind him, Thor stood at the forefront of a new era. He had been tested in body and spirit, and though the path ahead was still fraught with challenges, he understood that the true essence of an All-Father was not found in the hammer he wielded or the power he commanded, but in the love he held for his people and his willingness to learn from the past. As the golden light of Asgard illuminated his path, Thor took a deep breath, ready to forge a new destiny for both realms, united at last.